G'day and welcome to the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. Today we are talking about some players that may have slipped our earlier videos, some under-the-radar guys that we're going to fill you in now and give you our thoughts. Let's go!
Hodges done it from nowhere. From inside the 10. Sheed from the boundary. Dusty.
The legend becomes immortal.
G'day and welcome again to the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Casey, and you can find me on Twitter or X at Ball Boys Fantasy. Back again with Luke Rodnison, my co-host. How are you, mate?
I've been better. It's not great when you have a hickey in the middle of your forehead.
I thought you'd done something a bit different there, but no.
Tell
us the story.
I tried to get their guys in hair and makeup before to get rid of it. They touch you up all right, but I am still rocking the hickey right in the guts there. So
Just pull the hat down a bit lower and you'll be all
just
sweet, mate.
cover up there. No one should notice, but it's self-inflicted.
I don't know if many people are watching for our good looks, so I think it's all good, mate.
Well, not for yours anyway, but I'd imagine.
Okay, cool. Little drive-by there.
No, it wasn't a drive-by. I went straight through you.
But no, it's good to be back on. I've had a bit of time away and off Twitter and social media for the last few days, and obviously,
How's it been for you, mate?
It's been good, actually. I feel refreshed and I've got a new sense of just eagerness, ready for these preseason games that are going to be, hitting us hard and fast for the next few days. So
That's good, mate.
it's been good. And obviously we've had a lot of podcasts recently. We've been talking to other experts and content creators out there. And you and I have been, sitting back more so for the last couple of pods and listening and learning a lot from these
That's not like
experts.
us to be listening.
No, it doesn't. Definitely don't listen to each other. So, I've got a few thoughts about some players that we did miss in our initial kind of run through those positions. So that is what today's podcast is all about. Some players who are under the radar. Now, some of these guys maybe not so much under the radar in terms of their popularity and ownership, but we maybe didn't give them the love that they probably deserve when we went through our initial positional run through. So we're going to go through and touch on some of those players today and also have a few listener requests and just a general sort of temperature check on some other guys that we maybe have been changing our opinion on since those first initial podcasts. Get stuck in?
We're starting with the Tiger, too.
Yes. Two Tigers.
Well, we are. We're starting. Let's kick it off with Shorty. So
the one that did play the other day.
He did. Now, this is an interesting one, isn't it? Because we can select Shorty as a defender only at this point this year, and we know that at various
6 bye and yes.
Well, at various stages, throughout Damien Hardwick's coaching career at Richmond, Shorty did have that friendly half-back role that we like to talk about, but then there were points where he was running through the midfield, which, interestingly for him, the higher CBAs actually coincided with a reduction in scoring. So I guess the kind of great question here on Shorty is, where's he playing and what does that look like?
Well, for all reports say that he's playing off halfback. He played exclusively off halfback in the match sim the other day, even with a bunch of the midfielders missing in that match sim, like players like Dusty, Liam Baker, who we'll talk about in a second. Taranto was out. Prestia was also out. So a bunch of midfielders were out, and I don't believe, had a single CBA. He was exclusively playing off halfback. So I think we can feel confident that that's going to be his role. What do you, if we were to lock that in, what do you see his ceiling been? His career high average in his time at Richmond has been a 98, and that was in 2022. Did that in 22 games. But I do also believe that some of those games and some of those averages were affected by the back end of the season, also moving a bit more into the midfield. So prior to that, he was pretty comfortably over that 100 mark. Do you think he could do that again?
I think in that role where he's playing halfback, I think he can go better than 98. I wouldn't be surprised if he does go 100 plus. The thing that I'm waiting on at the moment is just a few more games from Richmond. Obviously, they had the match sim, like you said, but we had a lot of players out. It's kind of hard from that one game to work out, okay, what exactly is the game style going to be as well, because that halfback role in a lot of teams is not, I don't think it's a lock for that a halfback player to be a high scorer. It kind of depends on the game style.
Yep.
Depends on who that they mark as like the key distributor off halfback
Yep.
as well. So if in the next couple of games we see a game style from Richmond where maybe there's a little bit more possession across halfback and Shorty gets involved in that stuff, then, I think there's a potential for him to outperform what he's priced at.
I've heard of that being a discussion point for Richmond, that we are going to be kicking it more and possessing the ball a little bit more.
Okay.
But in that again, it's very early days. In that match, I didn't see too much evidence of that. I feel like we were still very, we looked similar in terms of our style of play, but obviously with some key players missing, that might change things dramatically. So
you also know you're not getting the best of what the opposition has
exactly.
to offer in those games too, which is interesting.
Yeah, so those things are maybe a little bit more difficult to get a gauge on in something like that. Hopefully next week will be a better example of a real, match that's up for, or a game that's up for points. So, and plus we'll get to watch them in opening round, which is another key point.
He's at a price where if you're picking him, you wanting him to be a top 6 defender. You're wanting him to be. So what do you have to see from him in the coming couple of games that would make you pick him?
I'd want him to be absolutely getting the large lion's share of the kick-ins.
Okay.
I'd want to see a game style conducive to him scoring where there is a little bit more chipping around, or he is just unquestioned the go-to guy every time coming out of defensive 50.
Yep.
And I'd also probably need some of those other options to maybe not meet my expectations.
Like a Danny Rioli or something like that.
Well, more like a Tom Stewart.
Sorry,
or
other
like
options
a
in other
Sheasel,
teams.
like some of those other options in our defensive line where,
Sorry.
because he does have that early buy round, I just need an extra reason for me to pick him.
Yeah.
Although some people are saying that obviously he's got the round 6 buy, and Nick Dacos is coming off that round 5 buy. I've heard some people talking about going with the Jaden Short and then going into a Dacos once Short has his buy. So there's a little bit of a game plan there. Again, I'm trying not to do too much of that tricky maneuvering because we all know that a week is a long time in AFL Fantasy.
It is indeed.
And 6 weeks is a fucking eternity in AFL Fantasy. So
I'll have the car wrapped up by 6 weeks.
Oh,
So
yeah.
You may as well not be playing by that point.
Fair enough. So, yeah, don't bother getting Dacos that way. But, yeah, so I am not really in on that strategy, but that would be what it has to happen for Short to come in there, which at this point I say is unlikely. But if you are keen on him, he is a guy that I think has room to outproduce his price.
I think that's fair. Let's talk another Tiger here. Now, this is a guy that I brought up with you earlier in the preseason. And it was a guy that
missed it.
Well, I mean, for good reason too, I think. So the reason I brought up Liam Baker was because I think I just love him as a player.
Oh, I
so
absolutely adore the man.
Always in the forefront of my mind. And I just thought that maybe with a new coach, maybe there's an opportunity for him to get a new role. And then when I went and had a look at some of his scores from last year, I immediately...
You threw up in your mouth a little bit.
I did. I thought, I can't deal with all this disgusting scoring.
Yeah.
But things have changed since then. What are we hearing now, mate?
So we're hearing that he's going to be playing more time in the midfield. And I'm really annoyed that he didn't play on Sunday when I think he was at a wedding or something.
Oh.
It's like it's not even anything important, really.
Right.
So
People get married multiple times now. You just go, you wait till the second one.
I don't know if it was his or someone else's, but I have no idea.
Well, if it was his, I feel like that's reasonable that he should probably
I
be
heard
there.
a wedding. I feel like we would have heard more if it was his wedding. But
Let
anyway,
me see if I can find out.
he wasn't there, and that is annoying because we're not going to see... Because the thing is, he's going to be playing more in the midfield. Well, what does that actually look like? Is he going to be in there 60, 70% of the time? I can't imagine he's pushing out Taranto. There's a lot of talk about Dusty playing more midfield time.
Yep.
I can't imagine him pushing out Hopper. Then you've got Prestia whenever he's healthy as well. So I think
Which is infrequently.
Which is, again, to be fair, he's not often very healthy. But with all those guys being there, I think there's 4 players that are ahead of him in the pecking order when it comes to CBA usage.
Yeah,
To me, at best, at a healthy Richmond, he's the 5th guy going through that midfield. You could argue that Prestia is not often healthy, but if he's there round 1 or opening round, I don't love trying to rely on the fact that someone's going to get injured, even if they are super injury prone like a Prestia.
Could you make the argument, but that if you're looking towards the future in Baker out, like more on the outer Prestia when he plays, he's going to get his CBAs, but if you're thinking about what's to come...
Yeah, I mean, definitely. You could definitely think of that, but I'd return to you and say, we've got a new coach.
Yeah.
Does he want to start the season that way and we're looking to the future around 0? Or are we at least trying to get a few decent performances in the park the first 6 to 8 rounds? And
I think
then we start to go midway through the season when Press has done his hammy twice. And, Dusty, he's looking solid, but he can also play forward. Maybe then you start to do that.
Well, saying that Presti is not good, saying that Baker's not going to give you good performances, I think is like comparing him to some sort of rookie or something. Like Baker's a jet.
Oh, he's a jet. He's going to do exceptionally well in whatever role he's in.
But I mean, I do see what you're saying. This is why it's an interesting watch, isn't it? So
Yeah.
So then let's ask that same question. What do you need to see from Baker? He's a guy that's cheap. He's in the forward line. He's got DPP forward defense.
Yeah.
There's a few things that are going for him.
Like I said, I love the player. He's one of my favourite AFL players, in the entire comp on our team. He does all the little things, but that's why I'm always hesitant to suggest him as an AFL fantasy player.
I think you're biased.
Well, no, I just think that the reason I love him so much is because he does all those little things. He's
not a pig.
They're not fantasy-related things. Like,
Yeah.
he will be the first to dive for a smother. He'll be the first to give an awesome shepherd and get the hardest ball you've ever seen and give it a little handball. It's 2 points at the end of the day.
Yeah.
He is not normally the type of guy to, be screaming there for that cheap, +6 points.
Yeah.
He's to the next contest. And I've got some stats to back that up as well. So obviously he's popped his head into the midfield at times over his career at Richmond, which is still, not too long. He's still a young player. But even in times where he has had 40% or more CBAs, his career average is 83 points. He's priced at 70. So that does give you a little bit of upside. But again, when you have the early buy around, and again, I don't know if he's going to get more than 40% CBAs. I think that would be a bullish take.
Yeah,
to see him go past 40%. I think around that 30 to 40% is feasible. But if he's doing that, and maybe he's doing the forward first, a forward roll first, inside mid second, I can see some really low scores still playing in there. He's actually had better scores when he's come off the half back line, and whenever he's had kick-ins, he's got a larger sample size of him being able to do more 85 plus in his career in that role versus the high half forward pinch hitting in the midfield role. Just because, he's not the kind of guy that gets the cheap stuff. He gets the hard stuff, does the little things, and that's not what we want for fantasy.
Yeah, I'm interested to watch. I don't think it's far-fetched to say that there's a scenario in a couple of weeks' time where we're all thinking, oh, this role looks pretty good and the scoring was all right. So I can definitely see both sides of the argument. Something that's interesting too, and maybe doesn't get as much airtime, is that not all midfield roles are built equally as well. So just because you have the same CBAs as someone else, if you're playing a completely different midfield role, one that comes to mind is Kane Lambert when he was at the peak of his powers at Richmond. He would have been playing high CBA percentages on. I'm assuming, I don't have the stats to back it up, but his role was basically to cover Dusty's man because Dusty would fuck off forward. So
Dusty's not tackling. He's not doing the hard work, and maybe that is what Baker's in there for. You've got Hopper and Taranto in there who could do a bit more of that now as well. But the user is going to be Dusty. I guess the accumulator is going to be your Taranto Hopper types.
It'll be interesting. That's at the very least, it's all going to be interesting to see how that pans out for sure.
Yeah, I think so. But at this stage, I have a hard time seeing it eventuating. But again, I love the man, and if he does show me piggish tendencies, then I'll have a look at it. Okay. Let's move away from some Tigers and talk about our last defender that you and I have selected, and that is Jordan Clark. I think we touched on him briefly in our Defender podcast, but a couple of things have happened, obviously, since then. The confirmation of Hayden Young going to midfield seems to have happened. We've also had an injury to Heath Chapman, who is in doubt to start round one for them. So a couple of bodies going down. Is Jordan Clark trending up, trending sideways, or how are we viewing him this preseason? And is he a legit option for us to start him? Again, he's got that good buy that the Freo and Port Adelaide players have.
He does. He was a guy that I've been giving some consideration to for a while now, and the Chapman thing I don't think influenced me too much because I know there was a bit of talk that Chapman was going to be playing potentially a bit of a wing role as well. But I definitely think the Hayden Young thing is influential. Whilst Hayden Young wasn't taking the majority of the points down back, it was obviously Luke Ryan. I think it does free up a few points, but also a little bit of a role for Jordan Clark as well. He's a guy that I think down in that half-back role has shown that he was a little bit different to Hayden Young in the fact that he probably could be in that role a little bit more thirsty, a little bit more like possession-driven. And if he can get a few CBAs, when Luke Ryan's not down there throwing elbows it's like Boxing Day sales when Luke Ryan's at the goals. Sorry, a few kick-ins, trying to take those off Luke Ryan. But I think he's a guy that even in the back half of the year when Hayden Young went into, it kind of directly correlated with a few more points for Jordan Clark in those last 3 games there. So
this is something I want to touch on a little bit with that, because a lot of people are pointing to those last 3 and the last 5. The last 3 paints a very different picture to the last 5.
Yes.
Okay, and we all do need to remember that Hayden Young went into the midfield, I believe it was in round 20, so that was the final 5 games of the year. So this is where I have a little bit of an issue with people cherry picking stats, and you can cherry pick stats when they give you a better insight. And I will use the last 5 because this is a difference in the team's dynamic. Obviously, Hayden Young has moved into the midfield of the last 5. So the last 5 average for Hayden or for Jordan Clark, I think, is relevant. But if you were to split that into the last 3 versus the last 5, I think you're doing yourself a disservice because you're arbitrarily kind of just cutting off his bad scores and keeping in the good scores.
That's how stats work, isn't it?
I think that's how some people would like them to work. But look, with Hayden Young going into the midfield, those first 2 games with Hayden Young moving in there, Jordan Clark scored a 70 and a 67.
Yep.
Now, that was with Hayden Young in the mids, and he was kind of that second user in that time. Then he went on to have 114, an 89, and a 99. 3 of those 5 games were in wins, so there's not like a clear distinction in wins versus not in wins.
Yep.
The teams that he was versing, one was the Eagles, so that was where he had his 114. So again, maybe there's a bit of they beat them by 100 points.
Shouldn't that mean
game.
the ball's not at his end?
You would think so, but he is the kind of type that might just relish the fact of, like you said, that thirst factor. He might just relish the fact of getting a lot of ball. And the other game, they beat the Hawks by just under 40 points again, and he got his 99. So there's evidence to suggest that he could be value, but he also might not be. And he's at the price where, what's he at, 70 or...
He sort of needs to be.
He needs to be like a guarantee. Like, this guy needs to be approaching.
Yeah.
I'm just going to look up his price, actually.
What if... So while you're doing that, I think I certainly agree with you in terms of, not looking, especially at a small sample size, to the last 3 versus the last 5. I also do think that when those in-season changes happen, there is like a slight adjustment period for players going into those roles. The other thing too...
And he's 23, so he's young.
And the other thing too is where do we sit on a player like this? Is picking a player like this an easy pivot if it goes wrong because he is at the top of that? He's not a mid-price. He's just like he's above it. But because he's above it, if what you see in the first couple of weeks doesn't work out, he's an easy pivot because you can pivot down or you can pivot up.
You got options to go either way. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely that, and it depends, I guess, on who else you've selected. Like, have you selected an Elliot Yeo or his teammate Hayden Young? Or I'm sure we're all picking Hayden Young, but there is
we're saying that.
Lock. So yes, I guess it depends on how many of those other guys you have, and to give you those other options. Maybe you've already got some of the other options and you don't really have anyone to go to, depending on how you're structuring up. But I still prefer to have seen something, a bit more tangible, especially when you're at this price. If you're at a cheaper price, there's much more room for you to take those kind of speculative picks. Yeah. But this guy's priced at 76.5 points. So for him to go up 20 points of value, that's a top 6 defender.
Yeah.
So
you want to be banking on that.
Is him going up 10 points and averaging 86, 87, is that enough? It's it's an okay pick, but it's not a great pick.
Yeah.
So for me, I'd rather kind of start someone else and maybe he's the guy I trade into instead of the other way around.
So who in that sort of price range, because we talked to Jeppa and Jeppa gave us some great insights just in terms of the lack of defender rookies and having to have a reasonably strong backline. Well, there's not a lot of top price guys that we necessarily want to pick that have heaps of upside. Who are the guys that we're picking around this range? Obviously, Elliot Yeo's a name that's getting some airtime. Like, who else are we going to?
Windhager could be one. Like, it's 120K.
So go cheaper?
Yeah, it's 120K to go from Windhager up to Clark. So that could be something you could maybe small little restructure or something like that might be an option for people to do. You might be looking at going down from someone like a Tom Stewart down to someone like him if he does pop. Okay. And then, maybe using that cash somewhere else, and that might be a different way. I think there's always ways for us to get creative, but yeah, I think that would be a victim of you putting him in your team because he fits the price tag in terms of like the range of a kind of player you're looking for, rather than the player himself. Yeah, do you know what I mean? Like, it's like it'd be convenient if he was the great pick because he's at a great price, but is it actually likely to happen? I have my doubts. I could be proven wrong, though. He is the kind of player, and I agree with you, there is potential there. There is, a bit of thirst. We've seen him go for a 135. I think he did that in, a half or 3/4 in a preseason game at Geelong. So he's got some fantasy game about him. So I'm not ruling him out. I'm just saying based on that end of last season where people are kind of holding their hopes on, I can poke holes in it pretty easily, I feel like.
Okay. Yeah. Beautiful. Let's talk our next player.
I want to get your thoughts on this guy because he's spent a bit of time in my team.
Has he?
And
recently?
Recently, over the last month or so, and I'm 50-50 on it at this stage. I don't have a strong feeling either way.
Okay.
But Jai Newcombe for the Hawthorn Hawks. Now, he is a guy who... It's his third season in the NBA, but he was a mid-season...
In the NBA? Fuck,
what did I say?
He's doing well.
Jesus, I'm rusty.
He's code hopping.
He's third season in the AFL.
This guy is a jet.
He is... but he was a mid-season draftee. So his first season was like a halfway. He came in. I remember his first game. He had 14 tackles or something like that. So... It's really his third preseason. A lot of people talk about the third preseason and things like that.
Yep.
And also combining, his natural development, the absence of a Will Day. He's someone who, I think he had 69% CBAs. And the thing that really flagged my eyes was you think of a Jai Newcombe. What do you think about as his strength?
Tackling.
His tackles were probably the weakest part of his game if you compare him to the top 6 in fantasy. He was, I think, 4 tackles per game, which was lower than his mark average. I'm just going to confirm that before I spit shit. But so he had 4.5 marks and 4.3 tackles compared to the best 22 midfielders. They had 6.2 tackles. So he is 2 tackles behind the best mids in the game, which really surprised me because I, like you, thought, this guy's a tackler. That's his strength. That's his bread and butter. But he was actually, that was his area of weakness, plus the fact that he's got a bit of a weak handball to kick ratio. But I don't know. Is 22 years old? Is there scope for him to take another step forward?
Oh, there's certainly scope. What I find interesting in, like with a lot of the stuff that we say we want to watch in the preseason as well, is there's so many Hawks on people's radars that are
they can't all do it.
This is what I mean. This is so there's so many Hawks on people's radars that are deemed to have this potential upside. So where does it go?
Yeah.
If we see in the preseason that it does go to Newcombe and maybe so he only had 69% CBAs. 69%
CBAs, which again surprised me.
That does surprise me as well. And
he was, I want to say, second in their rankings. So he was first.
Was it Connor Nash? What did Connor Nash have? CBAs?
Connor Nash has 69 as well, so they were equal.
Okay. So they don't have a top guy that does that.
No,
80%
it wasn't
CBAs.
a top guy. They had a bit of a spread between Nash, Newcombe, and Warple were all high 60s.
Yeah.
Will Day was lower 60s, but he started a bit lower and then built up as well.
So what do you see as the more
big gap down to Josh Ward as the next guy?
What do you see as the more likely scenario? Is it that Nash and Newcombe go to 80% CBAs, or is it that guys like Ward, McDonald increase their CBAs?
The quotes that I've heard from people talking about, because we know also now that Will Day's going to miss round 1.
Yeah.
I expect he's actually going to miss longer. I think he's going to miss 3 to 4 rounds here. That they're going to be sharing it around, I think is the wording.
Okay.
I would expect if I was to pick one of these guys to become that big dog 80%, it would be Jai Newcombe. I don't think Connor Nash necessarily would do that.
I agree. If there's one guy that is, I would agree with that. But do you think that's more likely than McDonald, Ward, McKenzie?
I think
more?
Both can occur.
Okay.
I think it could be he only needs, if he's at 69, 70%, if he goes up another 10 to 15%, that can happen, as well as someone else coming in and having a 30 to 40% jump with obviously Will Day 60% missing from the side. In the 2 games that Will Day was not there last year, Jai Newcombe went 88% and 88% in round 5 and round 6. And in those games, I believe he had 120 and 118. Just double checking those. Now, it's a small sample size, but the CBAs, the scoring both elevated with him not in the side. And I can build an argument to say that he reminds me a little bit of like a Caleb Sarong of last year. Like a guy who was in there and, you consider him one of their best midfielders, but when you look into the numbers, it's like, well, no, he's actually got more room to grow. Like Sarong went from like a 65% to an 82% guy. I can build a slight narrative that Newcombe could do the same thing. But he's a little bit more expensive than Sarong was. And the team is, maybe of a similar level to what Freo was last year, but there's just a little bit less confidence for me.
At risk of going too long, but let's dig into it just a little bit more. So he's priced at 93. If we're talking about this as like a Will Days out, let's say hypothetically you said 4 weeks.
Yep.
Like if he's priced at 93 and you're picking him, it's not, you don't necessarily want to be trading this guy after 4 weeks. Are you anticipating him to be close enough to a top 8 midfielder?
Good question. Yeah.
The thing, sorry, to cut you off, but the thing that I think is like you can look at a guy like a Connor McDonald as that, okay, I can get on this guy for 4 weeks and take that punt. Whereas I feel like if you pick him, this is not like a 4-week play to then flip him when Will Day comes back.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. The only thing that makes me go, well, maybe we just sort of see how it goes is the options that are coming off their bye that are other good options, like a Sam Walsh, like a Tom Green, like an Errol Goulden, or one of these guys, even a Nick Dacos to plug into midfield or something like that.
So if it doesn't go...
if it goes well and then goes south, you've got maybe another option that you can jump over to that, we might still be in that kind of fix-up rounds in that kind of area. Worst case scenario, I still think he's going to be at least that 95 to 100 kind of a guy.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's disaster if you get a little bit of a hot patch at the start and then he goes back to being kind of just okay. He also has a late buy. I think he's got round 15, so he's the kind of guy that, if it does go well and you're happy holding him for that time until his buy, round 15, you flick him off and you don't feel too bad about it. You can kind of get someone coming off their buy. Whereas if you've got like a premium, you don't really have to trade your premiums that are doing really well. Whereas a guy like Newcombe, you don't feel too bad about it. But there's a few moving pieces. Like I said, he's been in and out of my side. Maybe, like I said about that Jordan Clark, is he just fitting a convenient price?
Yeah, sometimes when you get down to those last few spots, you rather than rejigging your whole team, you just find that convenient guy. Who goes better, Amon or Newcombe?
Newcombe. I think Newcombe goes better.
Okay.
I think he's just a more integral part of their team, and I think that they just want to give him the ball more. The other thing is that handball to kick ratio. Is that something that players change? Is that something that you think is...
I would suggest no.
No?
Unless there's a real concerted effort, because guys, they've been doing that since they were juniors. They feel that comfort
He does seem like a
factor
very in and under contested type of player.
Unless there's a directive said, you need to change your game, you need to kick more, then for me as a player, that's his bread and butter. He's doing what he does best for the team. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I can kind of see that. It's not something I guess I'd try to predict that it's going to all of a sudden change. So, But he's just an interesting one that I am definitely keeping an eye on in this pre-season.
Yeah, this is good fun so far. These are good players.
Yeah, good players. Let's talk about another interesting one that, again, has spent time on my side. Nick Martin. We sort of touched on the Carl Amon, who was a very similar type of player. But when we went through the midfielders, we skipped over Nick Martin. Just to start it off, where are you at this stage in Nick Martin versus Carl Amon? Do you have a preference for one of the two?
I have Nick Martin in with the Ox songs at the moment.
Oh, he's there.
You know what I love most about him? Is that he hates playing defense.
Defending. He hates defending. Yeah.
Hates manning up on someone, and that's what you want in a fantasy player.
That's exactly what you want.
See pill, get pill. Yeah. So I think we're not the first people to talk about this. It's pretty well publicised that he's looking at a half-back role, and the fact that he can pick it up on the wing, we know how juicy that half-back role can be.
Exactly,
The only thing that just makes me sort of pause for a second and check myself is just that Essendon seem to have a lot of guys off their half-back line. Not necessarily guys that score highly, but guys that when you say the name, you think, oh, that's a guy who'll get a bit of pill, like Ridley, Redmond, McGrath. Am I missing... missing anyone, but
I'm sure you are, but I can't remember either. So,
but you just kind of look at those names and you go, those are not guys that are popping out 40s and 50s. Those are guys that will get their share of pill too. Yeah. So it's interesting. I think that all signs point to Nick Martin having a good year, but there's just a few things that I want to have a look at.
Yeah, I think from what I've heard, Nick Hind is someone that's moved to the forward line to help facilitate that, but he wasn't really someone.
Strange that they've got him moving. The word Hind literally means back.
Well, he was relevant a couple of years ago when he did move back, and then now he's going back again. So, but like you said, there's still a few names going through that defensive line, but He just strikes me as that guy, and I think Roy from the Traders have been earmarking this one. He looks like he'd thrive in that role. Like he just looks like, and it's not even just that half back role that he's been pegged for. It's the Nick Dacos half back role where you've got zero accountability on your matchup.
You get my man.
Yeah, no, you were just going literally just there to move the ball and for offense, and I think that'd be something he'd be very good at. He's got a ceiling. He had several games over 110. He had a patch between round 10 and round 15 where his lowest score was 104, and that was on a bloody wing. And we know that wings can be a bit of a graveyard shift, and not
for him.
Not for him.
A guy that does what did he do, like 130 in his first game of AFL footy. So
yeah, he's got some upside.
Accident.
So I too am on the Martin over Amon at this stage. I just think he's a younger, more upsidey player. I also think he's more cemented in that move back to halfback. I feel like Karl Amon is more likely of the two to at any point switch back to the wing. Just because there are a few guys in Hawthorn, you talk about your Josh Weddles, your Sicilies,
but we listed
Seamus
a few of those
Mitchells.
guys at Essendon too.
Yeah, but I think they're like Nick Hines is the future. Karl Amon, he's not really the future at Hawthorn, whereas some of those other guys are. So that's just my thinking there. The only thing that people would swing to Amon is because we saw it at the end of last year.
Yes.
And there's evidence to say
but
that
we
he
might
can
get
score.
that evidence for Martin in the preseason.
We might. So, but I really like him. If I was choosing between the two, between him and Amon, I, at this stage, would be picking Nick Martin. All right, who we got next?
What do
we got next? Oh, moving into the forward line. A couple of dicey picks here. Let's start with the old man. And this is... We're talking under the radar players. This guy's actually very highly owned.
Yeah. The title of this podcast is not going to make any sense, is it? Under the radar.
But Nat Fyfe. We didn't talk about him. We completely disregarded him in our forward podcast, despite the forward line looking like shambles. Were we too quick to write off the dual Brownlow medalist in Fyfe?
Well, when you say dual Brownlow medalist and the fact that we have written him off, it probably does seem a little bit hasty, but it's still something I have some significant reservations about. A couple of things. Obviously, we've heard the fact that he's going to be going into the midfield, which is okay. That's fine.
What do you?
But
you keep going. I've got a question about that.
Yeah. Well, what I'm sort of thinking is, I think that he's going into the midfield, but he's not going into the midfield to be A1 top dog.
Yeah, that's my point.
So he's going into the midfield to be that little bit of class, and I just get the feeling that from this point until the rest of his career, he's going to be that quality over quantity type guy. And then hanging over all this, you have two massive flags. It's like the bloody UN. We've got flags everywhere. We've got the injury flag, of course. But then the other thing is, like, I think haven't they publicly come out and said, like, this is a guy that we will vest either.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've done it before. Yeah.
Vest or, it could be a rest as well. So
vest or rest. We don't want that.
And with a guy that we're picking at a price that we're expecting cash generation, imagine he plays 3 games, he's looking really good, he's averaging 75, 80, everyone's going great, and they go, oh, you've had a good one, Fyfe, just, pop the vest on, 35. Suddenly, your cash gen is just absolutely stalled.
Yeah.
Even if he then comes back the next week and keeps giving you those 75s, 80s, like, do you know what I mean? So I know that there's every chance I could be wrong, but I just have my reservations.
Yeah, like they come up against North Melbourne in round 2. Scenario, they're pumping North Melbourne by 40 points. Fyfe, come have a seat, mate. Like, just come and pop the jacket on. You've done your 3 quarters. Like, we're cruising. Don't worry about it.
There's certainly arguments for looking at it both ways. You could look at North Melbourne and say, hey, Fyfe could be in for a big one as well.
True,
so there's, we're just sort of giving our opinion there. I just feel like there's a few reservations
there. The other thing is, for me, Nat Fyfe, at his best, as good as he was when he was a Brownlow medalist, he wasn't... Now, he's a good fantasy scorer. Like, he had 105 seasons, but that's peak of his powers. Nat Fyfe was 105.
Yeah.
Like,
you're not talking about McRae numbers.
This is not... this is not Tom Mitchell. This is not someone who's someone like... even like a Lockie Neal at times. Like, he's a guy that you can give... He had 120 season in that COVID year. Like, this guy, as a Brownlow medalist, is not your typical AFL fantasy producer, because he is that guy that goes in and wins those contested balls, and he was always a better Supercoach player. And I'm sure he's a great pick in that format. But in fantasy, what's he priced at? He's priced at like a 50, I want to say. So he probably needs to go... where is he priced at? He's priced at 54.5, actually. So he probably needs to go 75, 80 to be a really good pick.
I
don't know if that's going to be where he's at. And the other thing is, he says he's going to be in the midfield. Is that 30%, 40%? What actually is that looking like when you've got Brayshaw, Sarong, Hayden Young?
Yeah.
Matt Johnson's going to be, trying to get in there. You've still got Jaeger O'Meara, who probably moves out a little bit, but there are a few names to go through there.
I think that the percentage will definitely be there, and if I was confident that there was going to be...
What number would you put on it?
I think it's going to be greater than 50.
Yeah?
Based on what I've been hearing. But the thing is, if I was guaranteed greater than 50% CBAs, not going to be subbed, not going to be rested, I'd be thinking, I think Fyfe can probably do 75, 80.
Yeah.
But it just takes one to stunt that cash
There's like 3 or 4 things that could go wrong.
Yeah. Oh, man.
I think it's definitely a watch, and like I've said this about all our forward options, and it's going to be the line that we pay the most attention to. It's definitely a watch. There is just, like you said, there's a few hurdles he's got to clear, and even then I'll be a little bit nervous about it. So if there's other options around his price that have similar upside, I'll probably go there. If they fall over and Fyfe is the last man standing, then I'll pick him, but I'm trying to avoid it if I can.
There's certainly scenarios where we could be going to the last man standing.
Yeah, that's right. Speaking about old men, having resurgence in different roles, Alex Sexton, and I have something I'm really annoyed about because I've got a little birdie inside Gold Coast, and I fucking knew about this, Alex. Knew about this.
Did you
Alex
know and
Sexton.
not tell me?
I told you.
No, you didn't.
Did I not tell you? But anyway, I knew about this in January.
We're breaking up, mate.
And I thought, this is not relevant. We're not going to care about this. It's Sexton. Is he, I didn't think it'd be this big deal that it was, so I didn't mention anything at the time.
I'm going to call you Nick Hind, mate, because you're a hindsight hero.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely talking shit.
Bro, the traders broke the news, not you, mate.
But yeah, I did know about this, and I didn't think it was going to be much, but apparently everyone's really keen. What are your thoughts about Alex Sexton? And look, he's cheap. He's definitely someone, and in the forward line, we like cheap. Is he someone in a half-back role, which is it's real. This is happening.
Bro.
At least in the preseason.
This is the craziest thing, hey, because it's awesome that the traders are able to have players on their podcast because it's different when you get a track-watching nuffy that tweets out like Alex Sexton's playing half-back. You kind of go, okay, yeah, cool. But when Sam Flanders literally gets on a podcast and says, pick this guy in your fantasy team, you go, what the fuck do I do now?
Yeah, well, now I've got to pick him.
I have to pick him. Yeah. So, I mean, this is the thing. I haven't made...
We need Dimmer to come out and say, put him in your Supercoach team or something
well,
like that.
He's said that for Flanders, hasn't he? So, I haven't actually made the move to put Sexton in because I think I'm just waiting to actually see it, but I think it's as good as a lock that he's playing that role. Look,
you're
not going to come out as a player and say that if it's completely false.
Now, I know halfbacks is something that gets thrown around the preseason a lot. We love it. We love the halfback, especially this season. There's a difference between a halfback he's like a small defender versus like what I would call your main distributor. Like, we're not thinking that he's going to be their main distributor, right? Like, we're not thinking that he's their Dacos or their bloody Tom Stewart or anything.
It's in the name, mate. Maybe he's a just sexy distributor. There's this sex on legs coming off the half back line, mate.
I don't know. And we could even lump Connor Buderick into the situation as well because
the name doesn't have
it doesn't quite have that
Sexton off the half back. Oh yeah.
And the mustache, I think, is the other thing. Look at that stash and the.
And I keep telling you got to trust people that have moustaches and hickeys on their forehead.
You've got Connor Buderick. You've got Will Powell, who I'm pretty hot on as well. You've got Lockie Weller, who though he's starting the year injured, but he'll eventually come his way back to the side. I just have maybe this is a little bit. I need to check this. There's a bit of PTSD with Constable that was in our side last year. Huh? Oh, jeez, okay. I was like,
what you just mate, we're going to have to put the explicit tag.
Constable, who is, like, he started off in that halfback role, 2 rounds, good scoring, and then was out of the side. And he has probably, I would say, a higher fantasy pedigree than someone like a Sexton.
But did Flanders come out and say that Constable was a lock prior to last season?
Well, I think Flanders was a lock at that time, so he probably didn't have to say. But I don't know. I'm not ruling him out, but I'm looking at it. Obviously,
he's a Nick Caulfield kind of price.
Yeah, he's priced at 40. I think 380, 382.
And
so
he's in the forward line.
What
do you have to see then if you're not convinced by?
Well, he's playing round 0. Flanders. I'm going to want to have to see at least a 65 in round 0
in a good role,
in a scoring and a solid role. And feel confident that his job security is decent because he's essentially I'm not going to say rookie price. He's a mid-pricer, but he's there for the sole purpose of generating cash, and to do that, you need to have solid job security. He's got that round 3 bye. So why am I paying him when I could go down to like we're all going to have Harley Reid, but like some of those other cheaper rookies.
Yeah, I can see the argument, but when the question is sex, the answer is always yes.
That's a totally different conversation, mate. Why didn't you talk to me about that before? But yes, Alex Sexton, he's a watch. And the last guy here who's come out of nowhere, I would say, I did not think we'd be talking about this man.
Nowhere.
Charlie Lazzaro, playing inside midfield time, priced at $288K. He is someone that is a hot name these days. What are we thinking? I mean, he's essentially a rookie price. I go back and look at some of his scores in full game times, and it sends a shiver down my spine. But obviously, he has a different role, hopefully, and we will have a chance to look at this tomorrow when they do play the Magpies. But yeah, 21, turning 22 soon. Is he someone that, again, we just kind of see that role and go, okay, you're in our side? Or is it a little bit more selective than that?
When your name has consecutive Zs in it, that's got to be a good omen.
Double Z? We're not sleeping
Z.
on him.
Well, it certainly fits the bill for what we look for, isn't it? It's a change in role. It's the midfield role. I don't think it's something to be discounted, but like with anything that we've spoken about, I want to see what it looks like.
He had a game at the end of last season as a 74% CBA player, and in that game he scored an 88. So obviously 77%. We see a role like that in the preseason. Lock him in.
DPP, forward line, of course.
Yeah.
These forward lines are starting to get cheap. You reckon because this forward line's so shit, everyone's just doing this significant digging for these value players? Do we start with a forward line that doesn't have premiums?
I am certainly thinking that's on the cards, and I think there's a scenario where you start with 3 rookies on your field in the forward line because that's where the value is, and Lazzaro could definitely be one of those guys with that role that you start on your field. So if he's got that 40+% CBA role, I'd pretty much lock him into my side and chuck him on my field and feel pretty happy with that. So it's just a matter of if we see that in the preseason or not, and if he's there round 1, I think if he's got the role, lock him in. Not too much more to discuss there.
Now, you put the question out to Twitter.
Yes, I'm back on Twitter. Took a little break, just a few days.
Tell me really, did you completely cleanse?
I did. I deleted the app off my phone.
Did you actually?
I deleted the app.
Nice,
went
man.
off, and so what was it, 3 days all up? Felt like an eternity.
Twitter community would have been in mourning, mate. Where's Mitch?
I reckon so. I'm a vital member over there. But yes, did send out the the call out. Some players that people wanted to discuss that we haven't really discussed.
I'm back in the tweet?
I'm back, baby. My 3 days. No one even noticed I was gone, really.
Nope.
But some people that responded back, we did cover a few of the names already that people did respond. But the first one we'll talk about, maybe a quicker sort of discussion here. Yep. Mitch Hinge. What are your thoughts on Mitch Hinge? I think we've spoken about it a little bit, but maybe elaborate a bit more. Is he someone you're considering highly? A watch? What do you think?
A watch again for me. He hasn't really come into too much consideration at the Ox Songs. I just think that there's... I feel like there's better options that present potentially more upside. I know that it's something where we've seen a little bit from him. Yep. But I think there's also some opportunity for that role not to be as cut and dry as perhaps it was when we saw that scoring as well, with a few new faces in the Crows backline as well. What do you reckon?
He's a watch. He's never really spent time in my team. I sort of see him kind of similar to a Jordan Clark in a way, although his sample size of doing that 90 plus is much larger. So in a way, I almost prefer him to a Jordan Clark because the evidence is a bit more there. In a side like Adelaide, it's tough because there's a lot hinging on them. But in terms of their game plan, that wasn't intentional, but I registered it. In terms of the game plan, like how much chipping around the backline do they do? Are they still that super heavy stoppage team? And I think that is not the best for a player like him. So you have to tick a few boxes for me. A watch, but not someone who I'm super excited about, I would say at this stage. Matty Johnson, Freo.
Yeah, a proven scorer in the right role and played a great role for us in our teams last year.
It's just too expensive.
He's too expensive now, but also a few unknowns with that Freo midfield. So we've got people coming out saying Fyfe's in there, Hayden Young's now going to be in there.
Apparently Will Brodie's training the house down.
Okay,
So-
well, he was a guessing game last year, wasn't he?
Yeah.
What was going on there? So
It's too much risk. When your role's uncertain, your vest is potential still there, and you're paying $500K. I need more certainty for someone than that.
Yep.
Darcy Parish, a bit more of a premium pod option. Have you ever considered putting Darcy Parish in with the Oxlongs?
No, Parish hasn't trained with the Oxlongs. I feel that there's far better picks around that price and then also cheaper as well. So, like, he's obviously, significantly more expensive than Butters, Steele, LDU. And if I'm going to pay for a guy that's just under $1 million, I'm probably going to pay for someone like Lairdy.
Yeah, I think if you're picking Parish, you want to be confident that you can just whack a C on him.
Yes.
If you are confident that you can put a captaincy on Darcy Parish, by all means, I don't have a problem with the pick. I think there is some level of upside. You're not picking him because he's underpriced per se, but there's a world where he goes 110 and that's a solid pick and he's unique. I don't see him getting much of a tag or attention or anything like that.
Yeah.
So my thing is, can you be confident putting a captaincy on him? If the answer is no, you probably shouldn't have him on your side.
Fair enough. Next bloke is JHF, Horn
Jason
Francis.
Horn
Francis. What do you think he looks like this year in terms of, we've heard that Wines is a guy that might be getting some more midfield time.
I think he has to be the guy that makes way for that, if that's going to be the case.
Why
Either him or Drew or a bit of both.
People who watch Port more closely probably be able to answer this question, but what's the rationale there? Like, Horn Francis is obviously the future. I know Port Adelaide are in their premiership window. Yeah. So is that the justification? Is it, okay, well, think that
He's a pretty handy forward as well.
Horn Francis?
Yeah.
In terms of explosive.
He could take a decent mark overhead and, a bit more.
So I think my answer on Horn Francis is no, and it's purely because of the Wines coming back in there. I think that Wines does a bit what he does.
He's not a good fantasy player. Like, he's in that Nat Fyfe mould.
Yeah, true. He's an impact player, and you're right. What he does is good, but doesn't necessarily own your
I'd
points.
rather jump on after a couple of rounds if I see something different than launch into it round one. So it's a pretty easy no for me there. Shea, he looked good in the preseason game. Best on ground for me, but again, we have to note the players who were not there.
Correct. And also been publicly said that he'll play more forward.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's a pretty quick line through him, because...
A jet butt.
Yeah, love him. Absolutely love him. I think he'll be good. Probably better for Richmond than our fantasy team this year.
Yeah.
Liam Duggan. Any thoughts on Liam Duggan? Again, I think we spoke about him maybe a couple of times, but anything changed for your thoughts about him?
I'm not 100% sure on exactly what that role is going to be. The more midfield time, what percentage is that? Yeah. What role is he playing when he's across half-back? Is he a distributor, or is it guys like Witherden?
I find if you've got that many questions, it's not one I'd go into. You know what I mean? I think you want to be certain. He's not cheap. Like, he's a premium.
Yeah,
so
you're paying for a premium.
You want to be pretty certain on what he can do. Yeah. So I kind of echo what you're saying there. If I'm not too sure, and I am not too sure, I tend to look at other options around his price. Couple of guys that I am also very much watching in the preseason, guys with potential midfield roles. Tom Powell for the Kangaroos and Jai Clark for the Bombers. Now, Clark's an interesting one because I think there is a couple of injuries at the Bombers. I think Hobbs is injured at the moment. I don't know what's going on with Setterfield, and you'd have to think that someone like who's that older bloke? I'm blanking on the name. Shield. I think you have to think he's coming out of the midfield a little bit. So behind Parish and Merritt, there's a few options and things that could happen in that third, fourth, fifth midfield role, and Caldwell could be that kind of a guy. What are your thoughts on either one of these players in Powell or Caldwell, who are both available as forwards?
Powell's interesting. So Powell's priced very similarly to Johnson, who we were just talking about before. What is it that makes you think that Powell is more in line for that midfield time at North Melbourne than Johnson would be at Freo? Because there's a fair few names stacking up in that North Melbourne midfield.
Yeah, there are.
There's actually quite a few guys.
Well, number one, he's a forward. There's a tick in his favour. I do feel like even if he's not maybe the permanent mid, he's at least in the team. Whereas Johnson, I think, is close to that vest kind of a risk.
What's North Melbourne's midfield look like? So LDU. Then we
got
go
Wardlaw.
Are we expecting Sheasel? What is the go with Sheasel? Because early in the preseason, it's like, Sheasel's going in the midfield, don't bother. And then we see match sim that he and McKercher are flanking each other either side.
Yeah, the recent reports have been he's been off half-back, but I wonder if that's more because of Fisher not being there. And Fisher is going to be playing in tomorrow's match sim. So I think we'll get a good understanding of how that lines up, especially probably in the first half. I'd expect maybe Fisher's maybe managed.
Yep.
But in that first quarter or so, we'll get a good idea, and I think that will help us. So if Sheasel's in there, then that's not the best for Powell. If Sheasel is off half-back, then maybe your Lazzaros and Powells might be those guys.
Consideration.
After like a Simpkin, Wardlaw, and LDU as sort of the main three. It's a watch.
In terms of Caldwell, at a similar price, I'd prefer to see Hobbs in there.
Yes, I think Hobbs is a better player, but not available as a forward and injured at the moment. I think he's done a hammy or something like that, so a bit of injury cloud there. The one thing I've seen as well, I think...
as in a tagging role previously as well, hasn't he, Caldwell?
I think so. I think based on, shout out to Jaden Popowski in his transition inside stoppage points, I think the thing for Caldwell is that he needs that inside midfield role to score.
Yep.
And outside of that role, he is a player that doesn't score very well. So, just an interesting one. He's one that not many people are talking about, and I think there's a real possibility that he is third or fourth banana, as people like to say these days, in the Essendon midfield. But, yeah, not one I've had in my team too much. But, again, maybe just someone just circle his name a little bit.
Add a little favourite
because, there's a lot that could happen in the forward line. But, yeah, just a little name to watch, I would say.
Beautiful.
That'll do it for us today, mate. It's good to talk about all these fantasy players again.
That was a good one, mate. It's good to be chatting.
We've got one more community chat series coming up. We will be welcoming in another multi-hat winner onto the podcast in Mini Monk, good friend of the show. He's going to be chatting to us about his beloved Freo Dockers. We'll probably pick his brain about the Nat Fyfe situation and everything else going on there. So stay tuned for that one, guys. Make sure you are liking and subscribing the video. We are very close to our 2,000 subscriber goal.
How far are we?
I think we're at 18, closing on 1850 or so, another 150 or so to go.
Right,
so make sure you get in there, subscribe, and give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, wherever you guys are listening. If you could do both, that would be absolutely awesome, and you'd be a legend. And if you have done both, drop them in the comments, and we'll give you a shout-out.
Also, I know we're a little bit away, but should we mention the live show that we've got coming up for those people who might not have been listening last year?
Yes, the live show. So when it does come time to footy actually being playing, we will be doing a live show on Friday evenings, afternoons, around the time where the Sunday teams do get cut, although this year might be a little bit different with that extended bench and vest thing.
Always good fun, but join us for a couple of drinks.
Live over on YouTube.
Yeah, after you've knocked off work. Or
4:30 p.m. Melbourne time usually is about when we start. I think I'll confirm that, but
look, I put you on the spot. Sorry, but
that's all good.
Join us for a couple of drinks after work, or even if you're at work.
We'll go through captains,
from the boss,
all that kind of stuff. We'll get the big boys going soon. So
beautiful.
Do check it out, guys. Again, 5-star rating review, like, subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.